Good to see you this morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Business Edge Briefings program. Today's event is called Unspoken Truths from the Startup Trenches, and it's going to be a wonderful program. My name is Denise Lucy, and I'm professor and executive director of the Institute for Leadership Studies at Dominican University of California. And it is my privilege and honor to have been a friend in partnership with Cynthia Murray, the former CEO of the North Bay Leadership Council. We've partnered since 2010, offering this program, and it's our 65th program that we've done together. Together, we've welcomed business owners and organizational leaders to share their strategies and their techniques to be competitive and to be resilient in both domestic and global marketplaces. Our goals for this series are to ignite innovation, to inspire creativity, and increase profits and productivity. Our speakers are engaging and recognized as experts who have inspired business leaders to thrive in good times and in bad. And I want to thank you, Cynthia Murray, our most amazing leader of the North Bay Leadership Council for so many years and has just recently retired and continues to represent the North Bay Leadership Council in our Business Edge Briefings program. She has been our co-founder of this exciting project all these years. We'd also like to thank our community partner, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber in Marin is a leading business advocate. It provides resources and it builds relationships, and it really builds results for our chamber members. So thank you so much, San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, for being our partner all these years as well. Also, many thanks to our partner on campus at the Borowski School of Business, the Marin Small Business Development Center, which we call the SBDC. Miriam Carell is the director. She has led experts who provide no-cost business advising to small businesses in many areas, including e-commerce, social media setup, pivoting strategies, HR support, and more. So please be in touch with us if you'd like to start or scale your business. Cynthia Murray will be introducing our presenter, and she'll also moderate the Q&A today. We ask that you please enter your questions in the Q&A window, and we really appreciate that. So Cynthia, please tell our guests about the North Bay Leadership Council, would you? And also thank you for introducing our presenter today.
Well, thank you, Denise. How exciting, our 65th program. It's been an absolute delight to collaborate with you and to be able to share the wonderful information that we've been able to present to the North Bay community. North Bay Leadership Council is an employer-led public policy organization representing the leading employers in Marin, Sonoma, and Napa counties, and they work on public policy issues of interest to employers like economic resilience, housing, transportation, sustainability, education. So all of those things are the mission of NBLC, and we are absolutely delighted to partner with Dominican, who is a member of NBLC. But today we have a very exciting program, and it is featuring Ashwin Gulati, who provides a rare insider's perspective on the entrepreneurial journey. You are in for a great presentation. From launching international ventures to leading executive teams, Ashwin has played a pivotal role in the takeoff and landing of more than 100 companies across diverse industries. With nearly 3 decades in the trenches, Ashwin has uncovered the hidden pitfalls, unspoken truths, and personal twists that ultimately define a venture's success or failure. As an author, he explores this reality in his new book, Soul Venture, A True Life and Death Journey into the Startup Culture. And there will be a link in the chat that will take you to his website that has all about the book and the feature articles commenting on it. Ashwin holds a BA in economics and mathematics from Claremont McKenna College, with additional studies at King's College London and the London School of Economics. As Denise said, after the presentation, we'll be taking questions. Don't wait till the end of the presentations. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A as soon as you think of them. And we will also share the slides with anybody who wants them after today's presentation. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ashwin Gulati. Good morning, Ashwin.
Good morning, Cynthia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the invitation. I wanted to share with you kind of, let me actually share my screen a little bit. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So as Cynthia mentioned, today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we don't fully talk about that both entrepreneurs and even investors go through in the journey of startups and both starting a company or scaling a business. And I'll go ahead and put in the chat I think the name of my book and take you to my company as well, because a lot of things I'm actually talking about are going to be really excerpts from the book. And I actually just lost my screen for a second. Can you guys see my screen?
No.
Interesting. How about now?
You need to go full screen.
Yeah, full
Excellent.
screen.
Okay. So I think one of the things I wanted to add to the introduction that Cynthia gave is that, originally I'm from India. I guess we're all local here, came from New Delhi to Mill Valley, when I was in high school. I'm still recovering from that. And it's been kind of a journey ever since I got here. I tried to kind of find the American dream. And one of the things I've done is to really pursue startups and entrepreneurship and started several companies. I've worked, as an EIR, which is entrepreneur in residence for accelerators and incubators. And I've seen a lot over the last 30 years. So I'm just going to distill a couple of what I call the unspoken truths in this presentation. And if you go to my website or my book that was just launched actually a month ago, and yesterday we actually had an event at Dominican as a book launch, which was very successful. So it's very exciting to talk about this book as well. But today's presentation is 5 or 6 unspoken truths, and I'll just lay it out there. And some of these things might be, obvious. Some things people don't talk about, and I think it's a good conversation starter. So that's my objective, is to just share that and then kind of answer any questions that you may have. So I'll start off by the number one, which I believe is, it's not just business, it's personal. I think this is probably the core of my book, which is that a startup or a new venture or accelerating a venture is not just about the business side of it. It's like a personal journey that the entrepreneur goes through, the founders go through, and some of the things are things that we don't talk about how hard it is, the impact it is, psychologically, physically. I go through a lot of that in my book. So we kind of focus a lot about, go-to-market strategies and, investments and investors and so forth. But, in the end of the day, it's like a 50-50 split in my mind. There's a lot of, things about the past, about what's really driving you and why you really are starting this company. In the book, I do a lot of analysis between, is there a DNA for entrepreneurs? There's DNA versus destiny. I look at the Eastern methodology and the Western methodology. So I think one of the things that I always say is that people that say it's business, not personal, I don't believe in that. I actually think it's normally the opposite. And as we all know, business without people is impossible. So it's de facto, I believe it's personal. I wrote this article about why Steve Jobs is wrong, and all I meant was not wrong about everything. I think he was wrong about using the word passion too much. I think that a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially young ones and first-time entrepreneurs, I should say, use the word passion like a lot, and as if it's like the thing that they need to position to investors. And I feel that it's overused, and it's not as as strong as we all believe it is. So I kind of delve into, what I believe is sort of the key, which is purpose. In fact, I think passion is a couple of steps above, interests and hobbies, and a true purpose and calling and even a moral obligation. I mean, it's very hard to stand in front of an investor and say, it's my calling to do this business. It sounds kind of strange, but the more authentic it is, I think the less people talk about it. So when I hear passion, passion, passion a lot, I think there was a time when that was very important, but I think nowadays it becomes such an internal journey, and it's so easy to actually to start a business that it has to be a little bit more than a passion, that I talk about. And one example I used is Ikigai, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this Japanese methodology, and I really believe in this, which is, kind of what it is that helps you wake up in the morning, and then if you do something that you're good at, and you can and you enjoy, and you can make money, then that's you found your Ikigai. And passion is not really in the center, right? It's really a little bit of a combination of mission and vocation and profession. And so I think, you know, I get a lot of red flags when I hear passion more than 3 times in a presentation, and I try to kind of drill down a little bit more as to kind of where the founder or the entrepreneur is really coming from. I think one of the most important factors, if people ask me all the time, what's the number one reason companies fail? And the answer, I think, is it's a hard one, because there's so many. It's almost like a 100-meter dash, in the Olympics. Everything's so close. But if I was to pick one for established companies, and we're not talking about like startups that just run out of money. That's one reason. The main reason companies fail. Other reason is there's a lot of conflict that can't be resolved. But what if you have all the money in the world, you have the best team, the best product, the best IP, and you still crash and burn. And it really comes down to timing. And there's been a lot of studies that have been done on this. And timing is a very tricky thing to get right. Either a product or service is too early, and you're spending all your time and money in educating the market, or it's too late, and then you're battling competitors, and you're in a different type of a game. But getting it right is very, very hard. And there's so many great examples of successes because of timing. Uber or Airbnb. Their timing was perfect, and then there are other companies that just crashed and burns, like Webvan or Pets.com, and those companies, their timing was really off because of where the internet was. So I think this is one of those things where I think is the magic, very hard to figure out, but if anyone can figure out timing in their venture and be careful about it, I think this is one of the biggest unspoken truths in my mind. Actually, I put this graph in here. It's also from my book, and it's interesting just talking about timing, how long it really takes for a company to be actually successful. So when I say startups, we're like pre-IPO. So sometimes it's like 10 years before these companies even go IPO. And then after they go IPO, look at the stock graph, it's 10 more years before these unicorns, really make it. So we're talking, 5 to 20 years where you become a billionaire if that's your goal. In my book, I kind of talk a lot about Tesla as well, and how many times they almost went out of business, and how many times they had to kind of pull it out of the fire. So timing, as you can tell, even post success, post IPO, is also very key. So this OPM and Series A crunch is really OPM is other people's money, I call it, investors. And normally, when I talk about investors for a startup, everyone is like, okay, I'm going to get this great idea, this business, and then I'm going to, get a few customers, and then I'm going to get VC financing. I'll get 5 million, 10 million, I'll scale and do a business plan, hockey stick. 9 out of 10 times you have to get started with small seed rounds, and I call that other people's money. And jokingly, I also call it the three F's, family, friends, and sometimes fools, but that's a Silicon Valley joke, because so many companies fail in the beginning. And one of the reasons is that what is required to get angel investor seed round is very different than what's required to get the Series A and Series B round. And that's called the Series A crunch, which is pretty much where all the companies fail. And they just can't move from a founder-driven mentality where you use more passion, purpose, to a real, like, now we're talking business, and we're talking about PE firm, and it's more about the numbers and a much higher level of due diligence from corporate investors. So I think Series A crunch is a very common term. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. And this is the trick where you always wonder, this company was doing so well, and then what happened to it, right? And it's because that transition is very, very hard. So the next one I wanted to share is what is called the 9X effect. I wish I had known this, decades ago. And I always say, got to innovate for the lazy, because what consumers, usually want, and what companies are often convinced what they want, there's a big gap. Almost they're three times off. An entrepreneur or investor could have the best idea. They're like, oh my God, this saves you time and money, and your company could do better. Why aren't you buying? And customers are just careful. Changing their behavior is much harder, and sometimes they don't see the need for it or the timing of it. So one of the biggest tricks is it takes so much longer and costs so much more to get a new product into the market. And I believe it's because of this 9X effect, because the consumer, the customer, and the company are 9X removed from reality. They the consumer, excuse me, the entrepreneur might think, they're 1X or 2X removed, but this is where the rubber meets the road when they really go out to market. So a good example for innovating for the lazy is, Prius is a great example. I mean, they were so successful by bringing a hybrid car in, but the consumers just saw that as really great gas mileage. Netflix, also was, streaming, movies, and the consumers were just, they were changing channels just the way they did on TV. So I think that's one of the keys of how to, bridge the gap between the disconnect of what consumers really want and what companies think they really want. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the inside journey of the entrepreneur and things people don't talk much about. I think there's a section in the book that we need to redefine the core dream team of our company. And SCRIT. SCRIT is I coined SCRIT. It means being scrappy and having grit. And so in my opinion, when we do a team, a core business team, you got to surround yourself first with non-business people that will actually take care of the core, founders and the management team, because it is so intense to get a new product or do a startup. And I believe in, I wish I had therapists since day one when I started the businesses, nutritionist, a coach, a trainer, whatever it takes to keep the number one asset, which I believe are the founders in the early stage, in good shape. And then surround that with management, staff and advisors, and always look for that SCRIT. I call it the SCRIT gene, who's not just gritty, but also is scrappy in their day-to-day functions. So this is kind of some of the points that I wanted to share with you. And I do want to say that the book is called Soul Venture, just came out, and I sent the link on chat. It takes you to the page of the book. There's a lot of press recently, even today there was a interview published by Grit Daily. All this is actually in the month of March. And so the book's doing very well. There are a lot of controversial things in it. You can always get it on Amazon online, or you could go to Book Passage. But I did want to sort of take some of these excerpts and some of these thoughts from the book just to open discussions. Um, and those are some of the unspoken truths I wanted to share with you to have a conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Ashwin, for that teaser on what's in the book and what you've been doing. I think for me, one of the first things that I wondered about is the subtitle of your book, A True Life and Death Journey. What was the death part?
Well, one thing I want to tell you, if you look at the back of the book, and this is probably true, the first sentence of the book is, this is not a typical business book, right? Because I have actually shared some extremely revealing and personal things, both in my journey and my observations with a lot of entrepreneurs I have, worked with. Um, I have known and have been personally in many dark places during launches of companies, and there's a lot of talk about depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts, and how hard really it is, because an entrepreneur gives it all. And even though we can't do this without investors are quite diversified, but the founders are all in and fighting in day out. So there's a lot of personal and very, very revealing things in the book that get you close to the death journey. Not to mention that 97% of all startups will probably fail, so that's a clear death indication. But what I really meant was the personal side of it.
Gotcha. So question is, what are your thoughts on the effects of agentic AI and how it's so prevalent in many tech startups these days? How will it affect barriers to entry? In other words, the moat, it's so easy to do, super high competition. How do you see the successful companies that come out of this domain changing the workforce? That's a lot of questions in
Yeah,
one
it is.
word.
But let me tell you which question I'm going to answer, and to make sure I understood the question. I think the question is, how is AI going to affect the landscape? If that's the question, I would say, well, first of all, um, back a couple of decades ago, the way I look at it is that the funnel for startups was like this, when we 20 years ago. And now the funnel is like this because it's so easy to start a company. I mean, I could start a company within 24 hours, get a website going, get somebody overseas on Fiverr or Upwork. I could click a button, and then it could be launched by tomorrow, right? I think what AI is going to do, and is doing, and I already see it in my business, is that it's going to accelerate that even more. And it's going to flatten I think, the funnel even more. Um, the good news about that is, it's going to get easier to get your message and more polished, because some of these AI applications, and I've used, ChatGPT, Perplexity, they're pretty impressive. Can help you fine tune a lot of your what you need to do to get a startup launch, content and a lot of things, right? Um, so I actually believe there is no, you just got to train the dragon now. I think there's no way out of it. It's not like it's going to go away. It's going to accelerate.
So
It's
the questioner clarifies that
Yeah.
there's a difference between AI and agentic AI, AGENTIC. I'm hopefully saying that word right. And he wants to know more about, you think, what the impact of the agentic AI would be.
Let me make sure I understand agentic AI, what you are referring to from. Yeah, I mean, I think agentic AI, agentic AI is,
Can you tell us? I have no idea what that
well,
is.
I think, I was is a type of artificial intelligence that can act independently to achieve goals, right?
Okay.
Um, I think I'd actually personally, this is a personal comment. I'm not by the way, so I'm not a technical, although I'm a tech CEO, I'm not a technical person. I'm not a programmer, and for that say, I'm more on the business development sales side. I think there's a very small difference between the two. I think it's all actually headed towards agentic AI, where AI is going to be, creating sort of the goals and achieving goals independently. And pretty soon, I think I've seen articles where, you've got assistants and you've got actually AI that's doing a lot of the work and initiatives for companies. Um, I know there's a lot of funds right now. I talked to a lot of VCs they call it deep tech, and that deep tech is all in this agentic AI field. I haven't personally worked in a company with agentic AI yet, but I do believe it's on its way pretty big.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So back to the funding, you talk about it's how hard it is to access the venture capital. And I understand the North Bay, it's tough. I also heard you say you're probably going to start more with angel investors than VC. So for North Bay entrepreneurs, do you have any tips on how to have better luck in getting angel investors or venture capital? And especially I've seen the difficulty being even harder for women and people of color. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as the funnel flattens in my mind, the market traction requirements increases. So what that means is that there was a time back, great idea, scribble on a napkin, let's get some money. And now it's like you've got to get a lot done before you can get the investor that you used to 10 years ago. You have to have the product, or the service, maybe have a few customers. So it puts a little bit more pressure on being scrappy and gritty, and to get to that level. And I've presented at many angel groups, Karitsus and North Bay Angels um, and VCs and so forth. I think that unless you have a very impressive past and track record and some strategic partnerships for a first-time entrepreneur especially, there is probably no way out to at least get seed funding via angel investors. And sometimes, unfortunately, and this is the chapter about OPM, other people's money, you have to rely on your relationships, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Um, and if you can get away with not taking too many investors on your cap table, I would recommend that because, it's better to take, you know, $50,000 from one than, 10,000 from five. Because in the end,
Hard
they're
to
going to be
ride
your
all
boss.
those horses.
Right. Because, if I may say this as well, a lot of people start a business and they say, "Oh, because I want to be my own boss." And then they get 20 investors and now they have 20 bosses. And
Yes.
I said, weren't you better off with your one boss before? Is what I sometimes say.
A questioner wants you to talk a little bit more about the Series A crunch.
Yeah. So that's like when everyone is, my God, the company's doing so well. We raised $1 million from angels. We've got customers. We, let's now raise a bigger round and let's go to the VC or a strategic investor. You go there, you do your presentation, and then all the all the ideas and strategies that you used to get the angel funding don't really seem to work anymore. And it's more spreadsheet driven. It's more like you have to know your unit economics. You have to know your margins. You have to know your numbers. You have to know it becomes a very serious business sort of a discussion. And a lot of the founders that are very good at getting the initial funding aren't as good as getting the later ones. And so I always, believe to, pass the torch or bring more people in. But Series A crunch is really where the companies um, are unable to really secure funding with strategic investors. And here's the big reason is that the strategic investors um, don't have don't have as much of a diversification. They want to do few, like they want to do fewer deals and larger ones because they don't have big teams. So now you're competing against a lot more people. And so I think that's a really big um, eye opener, especially in the tech field, especially in Silicon Valley, in my opinion.
So another question that you just alluded to is how do you handle the founder syndrome?
I think I think you should read my book on that one. I think that's one of the biggest issues in companies that we don't talk about. I mean, I've had it. Everyone has it. What is the founder syndrome? And the founder syndrome really is that the founder, after a while, can't really get out of his or her own way, right? And it's like their baby, and I really can't answer that question except you need to get a therapist at day one, because it is very hard to overcome founder syndrome. And a lot of the companies I work with, and I do a lot of restructuring and interim CEO work where I get called in when things are not going well, pretty much. And I can say that 50% of the time it's business related, product market fit, whatever it is, or technology market fit, or the combination thereof, or sales or marketing. But 50% of the time, and it's hard to say this to the founder, it's really a founder syndrome situation where you have to surround now the founder with other pieces to support them, because they feel like they can do everything, or what they were able to do in the initial stages is not something they're able to do now, but they don't fully realize that. I don't know if I answered the question. This is a very big topic, the founder syndrome, and lots been written about it. And I think it's a really um, it's a door opener to why founder syndrome really exists, and what are the personal demons or backgrounds or dark sides that's part of it is in the book that we don't talk about, that makes founder syndrome happen, and it's sometimes inevitable, you know.
It definitely is a trap that people have to be aware of, and I think you're thinking on creating the entrepreneur's own dream team. Maybe explain that a little bit more. And in my mind, finding the right people for that dream team could also be a challenge. Not only that you need them, but who's the right player for that.
Yeah, no, what I meant by the dream team is when you walk into, let's say, a strategic investor, and I've been in, they look at the team as number one. They're like, okay, who's your CEO? Who's your sales animal? Who's your CTO? Who's your, CFO? And what have they done? It's like, and I believe that's, and this is where I get a lot of pushback on this, but I believe that's kind of an old-fashioned way of looking at it. And I believe the core of the dream team is the personal support that um, these people really need. And you surround that core, and then you put the other people around it. And I think the investors, I don't understand why they're not making it a requirement. I mean, there's so much technology out there. They could be, Fitbits, and they could be, even requiring, the management or founders to, um, wear these Fitbits and, take care of themselves, because that's, that's the number one asset. And after the money's wired in, sometimes it's all business. And so I think that's what I meant by the core dream team in the book.
So building on that, a question is there still rampant ageism in the startup culture?
100%. Yeah. I'm feeling it, right? Um, Although there is a chapter in my book about um, one of my clients that started a company at 65, and another one about who I was working with, and she was 80. And he actually did a TED talk about how to be an entrepreneur after retiring, and there's a little hidden message in the book, which is that maybe it's not a sport for the young. Maybe it is a sport for later in life, because once you start a startup, it completely puts your life out of balance. And when you're young, or you're getting married, you're starting off, having kids, it's already off balance, right? And so now you're doubling down on off balance. Whereas later in life, you've got all this experience as well. You're a little bit more balanced and maybe a little more secure. So I think this is something the investors haven't caught on to, that, just because you're younger doesn't mean you have more energy, It's so I see it all the time. I mean, everyone, um, I know a lot of I'm going to divert for a second. A lot of people that do their startups, They say my passion was freedom. Really? Oh, I'm doing a startup because I want freedom from work. Then they do a startup for 3 years, and then they want to get out of their startup because they want their freedom back. And then they go out and get a job, and then they realize it's so much harder to get a job, um, because they now have lost some of their specialization, and tech has moved forward. And so there's actually an article I wrote, and it's on my website. It's about how to not sabotage your career and still run a startup. And I think that's an interesting way of looking at how you kind of always keep your skills sharpened a little bit because of ageism, and you kind of get diverted. Your skill set gets diverted. Your hard skills soften, and your soft skills harden. I think is the way that I look at it.
So a skills related question is, you used Ikigai. I think I said that right for the
Yeah.
Japanese. There's another Japanese philosophy called Ringi, R-I-N-G-I, and that's where the employee learns to do every job in the company. Is that still something that's still happening, or do you see that in the startup culture?
Honestly, in the startup culture, I don't see it much. I see it in later in more established companies where there's all this rotation going on between every department, and then you decide which department you want to work in, and you want to learn everything about the business. The good news about the startup, though, is that you do get exposed to a lot of the other pieces. But I think, in my experience, um, you know, you have to like stay in your lane and focus, but the lanes are so close together that you see everything. But I haven't seen that as much in startups, but I have seen that, the rotational programs and, looking at other departments and companies for sure.
Another question is, do you have tips to avoid or lessen the 9X effect?
Yes. Two things. One is, let's assume it's a product company. I'm going to answer this question in a product or a tech-driven company. One would be not to confuse technology market fit with product market fit. Everybody confuses that sometimes. Like the technology works, everything's great. Let's go out and increase sales and hire more people and do marketing. But they haven't made the gap between technology market fit and product market fit, which is that we're now looking at it from the customer standpoint, not from the product standpoint. And the number one tip I can say is if you can get 10 customers that are happy, and then you have their case studies, and they're in different categories, and they're willing to give you references, you've done the best you can. One or two sometimes are outliers, sometimes they're different types of personalities or stages in businesses. So I think, um, you know, some technologists don't like it when I say this, but market traction trumps all, and having that part of the business after the product is done, carefully looked at, I think is one way of avoiding it.
So you talk about how timing is everything. And I didn't see on your list sort of what the current economic climate is as one of the things to consider in timing. And here we are in a time of economic uncertainty,
Right.
lots going on. How much would that factor into your timing decision?
Well, it doesn't factor in on the company side. It does factor in on the industry side. So, for example, right now, given some of the political climate, there's a lot of. I was with an investor, a friend, over the weekend, and his total focus is, sustainability and green tech, and he's seeing a little bit of a um, contraction in the market. So I think that if you look at the political or economic climate, you look at what's expanding and what's contracting, and then I think that part is affected. But I think innovation and new businesses and everybody wants new product services, the next new restaurant in town. Those things aren't going to change. But if you look at the timing you know um, of certain initiatives that are being changed or are being contracted economically. I think that's the part to look at. So when we do our analysis of not just the market size, but the market force and direction, that I think affects timing, but not as a whole in my mind, you know.
So when you, well, let me say, one last question was, how often do you see people over 55 getting funding?
Well, this goes back to the ageism, right? I don't think it's black and it's as clear cut as the age. I think it's, well, let's see who that person is. Now, if that person has started 3 companies, gone IPO, I will say in 5 minutes, right? If that person is a first-time entrepreneur, no, and never worked in a startup before and is coming out with a tech product, I think it would be equally as hard as, if you were not 55, right? Um, there are things you don't talk about, but yeah, I believe, you know, on the record, off the record, that ageism exists. But at the same time, in the startup world, there are other factors that could trump it, such as, I mean, you've got a patent on something and you already have 5 customers and clients. And I gave you an example of someone over 65 that the company is very successful. So I can't fully answer that question like straight up, but I know why the question was asked, and I say, yeah, that's a good reason to ask the question. But if you're 56 and you just came up with the best product and you already have 10 customers and you've been spending 5 years of your life in it, I mean, your chances are pretty high.
That's good news.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the North Bay. Can you give us some ideas about what the pros and cons are of being an entrepreneur in the North Bay? And what we'd love to know is there ways we could strengthen our support for the entrepreneurs in the North Bay?
Yeah, I've actually started a couple of companies in the North Bay, and it's been kind of a challenge, and I'll tell you why. I never understood why people, why we got to move to the city. It's so much expensive, or South Bay. Why would you do that? I mean, I think North Bay if you look at the demographics of North Bay, it's a lot of retirees. There's a lot of people that have actually kind of made it, and real estate prices are really high. There's not that much tech, as we like it to be. I actually believe, North Bay is hard. It's hard because sometimes if you want to really scale a business and you need to get a lot of tech, now they have to commute from East Bay, San Francisco, or the South Bay, and there's so much competition in San Francisco and South Bay that, so I think there's some challenges. And even investors have come up to me and said to me, gosh, in retrospect, we should have, gone somewhere else, kind of thing, for this type of a product, or this type of a company, excuse me. But having said that, now with COVID and the world changing and now changing back a little bit, I think that they've found some sort of a hybrid mechanism where it doesn't really matter where you are. And I do know a lot of companies that are virtual, a lot of companies um, that have teams worldwide, actually, not just South Bay, North Bay. And so I think it's changing. And, now we have these couple of places I think in Centerfell, there are a couple of, co-working spaces, Avant Space and VenturePad. And I think those are really good places to find that middle ground. I don't know, recommendations for North Bay. I don't know. I mean, I think it really comes down to what type of business it's going to be and how much manpower is going to be required and what type. And if you said to me, we're going to need 50 engineers to do this, I would say North Bay would be a tough place. Okay. But if you said, I'm design firm and, architectural, I would say that would be a great place, So it really depends. It would probably be the answer. I know probably not answering the question directly, but I think that's how I feel about it.
So I know that there has been incubators and maybe even accelerators in the North Bay in the past, and we're looking even to maybe do an incubator at Dominican. So what are your thoughts about how beneficial those are and the kind of participation?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I was involved with one of the incubators of Dominican many years ago, called Venture Greenhouse. And I was kind of one of the AIRs and looking at, honestly, here's the challenge of in incubators, whether it's Dominican or Stanford or it doesn't really matter. In my opinion, incubators are great, but if there isn't a adjunct piece associated with it, which somehow helps them take off, whether like a fund or some sort of real, like, fuel behind it, and it doesn't have to be the Dominican. It can be a partnership with someone. I think the chances increase greatly, right? If not, it becomes a little bit more like a co-working space with advisory that helps you get you the business plan. But again, to get into market, some of the big things are the team and the money and those side of it. So that's the trick. That's why Y Combinator and other ones are so successful, because they bring that funding as part of the equation to the table. Having said that, I do believe that Marin needs one, and it would be great to find some sort of a hybrid way of doing it, even if we don't have the fund behind it.
You mentioned the pandemic earlier, and one of the things that was very impressive to me about the pandemic was the response of so many people starting businesses. There was a big uptick in business license requests. So
That's true.
what do you think about that, and where do you think we can sustain that kind of interest in people starting their own business?
I don't know, honestly, but I always answer that question a different way, because I'm now more interested in not only the business side, but also why that business is being started, right? And I would like to really help understand why it is that those entrepreneurs, why that uptick is occurring. Is it because they need income, or they've been laid off, or is it because truly they have innovation? Is it because they're frustrated and they don't fit in somewhere, or they have a passion, purpose, calling? I think it's like saying, how do you do an uptick on purpose? I don't know, right? But I think it's not going to go away. I mean, in some ways, my book is very cautionary and almost convincing people not to do it. But but if you can pass that, you should do it, right? And I scare a lot of people. I hope I scare them away, because in a way, it's a bullet dodged in some ways. But other skeptics would say, well, if you don't take risks, there's no reward. So, you just have to balance it with many other X factors that go into the equation, I think.
So you mentioned tech a lot in your talk, and we're seeing a big churn in tech right now. There's been a lot of layoffs. There's been a lot of controversy about some of their practices. I would say they're getting a lot of bad press for being greedy oligarchs and things like that. What do you think that where does that sort of go? And is that, since we're so tied into Silicon Valley as a Bay Area economy, do you see us having any advantages or disadvantages around that?
Well, the reason I use tech as an example is when we talk about success, you immediately go to tech, because that's the only way you can become a billionaire the fastest in some ways, right? I mean, there's generational wealth, there's real estate, there's investment banking, but if you want to just hit a grand slam, that's why tech is so big. And I actually feel like it's kind of like, I'm not saying we're going through a bust or of any sort, but this is like the benefit of being my age. I went through the dot-com bust, right? And I had a company before, and I came out of it alive, but I had to do some serious restructuring. I took my development overseas to Bulgaria. I took testing to India. I had to, let go of some people. I feel like that we're kind of in a sort of this bubble area right now, where I don't think it's as big of a crash thing, but it's readjusting, or like a correction of the market in some ways, the tech market. Some is AI driven, some is this whole workforce driven, because people are now don't want to go back to work in person, and Some CEOs like Elon Musk are forcing everyone to do that. I don't think tech's ever going to go away, and it's just going to get faster and faster. But the ability to kind of cut through the noise is going to get so much harder. You know, I said it earlier. You know, I could start a business right now, and the same business is probably being started in 3 different countries that we don't know about, and it's just a huge field now. But you're right. The big tech, by the way, is being adjusted. The small tech is not. I know a lot of people in the last week that have joined. A friend of mine just, out of college, 5 years, is now moving to New York tomorrow to work for an AI startup, and there's a lot of people hiring. And I think these big techs are just trimming down right now, and all those employees are going to end up in startups or smaller companies. And if they can handle it, they might try their own.
So you mentioned someone who graduated. Do you have any tips to people who are college age or younger who want to become entrepreneurs, what kind of education they should get, other ways they could prepare themselves to actually become an entrepreneur?
It's funny because my daughter just got her first job, so we're all excited. But it's not in a startup, which is good. Um, I think going straight out of college into a startup it could be great as long as you're past that Series A crunch. I think would be a really great experience. A better experience would be to get a couple of years of something, and figure out like, hey, I want to be tech, or I want to be sales, I want to be marketing, I want to be, design, and then do the startup. I think that would be my recommendation. And if you want to do your own business, and I gotta say that, I mean, in my book, I talk about like the hardest business in the world is is the number one failure rate in America is the restaurant business or the hospitality business, and I've had some experience in that, owning it, and it was a mind bender, frankly. I say if you can manage a restaurant for 6 months, and you should start a business. You're ready. I mean, that's your post MBA, because there's so many moving parts. You have to learn about, HR and real-time marketing and costs and ratios and all that kind of stuff. I just think being out there for a few years in whatever you want to do and then doing a startup would be my recommendation.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This has been an absolute pleasure to sit at your feet and learn from you today. And I want to remind everybody that his new book, Soul Venture, the website is in the chat if you want to go check out the book and the articles that interview Ashwin. He's got a lot of information to convey. And as I said in the beginning, this is just a teaser for what we can learn from him. So thank you so much, Ashwin Gulati, for being with us today.
Thank you, Cynthia and Denise, for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And I also want to thank my partner, Dr. Denise Lucy. Again, Denise, our 65th program. What a joy it is to work together with you. And I also want to remind everyone that if you want a copy of the slides, you can just request them. We're happy to send them to you. But everything that he covered is also in his book, which you can certainly check out. Finally, I want to let you know that Dominican University runs various executive education programs, especially designed for the North Bay professionals, and they are A1 terrific professional education programs. So please check them out. You can find them under the Institute for Leadership Studies, and they're in the chat right now. And you should also feel free to talk to George Choi or Denise Lucy about those. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We look forward to seeing you again at our Business Edge briefings, in the fall. We really appreciate your being here today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.